The UK has been embroiled in tense Brexit negotiations with the EU over the future of its fisheries. Britain will be hoping to avoid a similar fallout to the cod wars with Iceland in the 70s, where many people's livelihoods were destroyed. The famous Cod Wars, which occurred between 1958 and 1976, saw Iceland triumph over the UK to extend its fisheries exclusion zone to 200 nautical miles from its coast. The UK opposed the announcement made in 1975 as they did not recognise the large increase to the exclusion zone, and so an issue occurred with British fishermen and their activity in the disputed zone. Hostility then erupted, as British fishing trawlers had their nets cut by the Icelandic Coast Guard, as well as several incidents of ramming by Icelandic ships and British trawlers, frigates and tugboats. Known as the Third Cod War, it ended in 1976 with a the UK conceded to a 200 nautical mile (370 km) Icelandic exclusive fishery zone after threats that Iceland would withdraw from NATO, which would have forfeited NATO's access to most of the GI-UK Gap, a critical anti-submarine warfare choke point during the Cold War. The result of the Icelandic victory was disastrous for fishing communities in places such as Grimsby, Hull, and Fleetwood. In 2012, the government eventually offered fishermen impacted by the loss of Icelandic waters compensation, but many believed it wasn't enough. Charles Grimmer, from Aberdeen, said at the time he was sentenced to a fine of £2,000 or 6 months in prison. He added, "Consider the ages of most of the trawlermen now. Some have passed on, or won't have the time left to enjoy the money. I am pleased they will be getting some. I was pleased with what I got, but it should have been more. I suppose there's a limit to what you can get though. I haven't been down to the harbour in 20 years. I lost all interest in what was my livelihood because of this." The UK's history of fisheries feuds with Iceland goes even further back, however. As highlighted in Guðni Thorlacius Johannesson's 2005 book Norway and the Anglo-Icelandic Cod Wars, the UK clashed with Iceland, Norway and Sweden as their waters became closed to outside fishing. Then Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey had become furious with Norway and Sweden as they refused to open up their waters to other countries, while Icelandic fishing grounds also remained closed. In Norway and Iceland, local fishermen fumed as Britons took trawlers to sweep up landing in their waters while they struggled with small boats, lines and nets. An agreement was eventually reached for limits on British boats, but the UK's fishermen were branded poachers and one was arrested in 1911. This is when Sir Edward Grey became enraged as he told the Norwegian ambassador in London that the 3-mile scope had become a vital national interest, a principle on which we might be prepared to go to war with the strongest power in the world.